because this sounds harsh, but companies don't care about people. There are 4 people that report to me. I take your advice 75% of the time. I hated it. Quite honestly, I hated it. Yes. He definitely created Bill Vass 2.0.
In 1961, John F. Kennedy told Congress, "We chose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." That speech wasn't about rockets, it was about what kind of people Americans had decided to become. Today's guest has spent 50 years asking the version of that same question. Not for the nation, but for every leader, student, and organization he has touched. What kind of person are you choosing to become? William Vass graduated from Hofstra University in 1975, the same year Microsoft was founded in a garage in Albuquerque, New Mexico, by 2 college dropouts with a vision nobody else could see it. Over the decades, since he worked at Dell, he taught at Northwestern, Harvard, Clark, and Loyola, shaping leaders across more than 2 decades. He built the Illinois Technology Foundation from ground up. He fought to close the digital divide for 18 million American families. And now, at a moment when artificial intelligence is rewriting the rules of everything, he's writing books asking the question that will define our generation. What happens to humanity when machines can do everything we can, and more? This conversation is for every ambitious person who suspects that the path to something great requires more than ambition alone. Welcome, Bill Vass.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here with you today.
So, Bill, before we go anywhere near technology or leadership, I want to start somewhere personal. Who was the person who believed in you first, and what did they see in you that you couldn't have seen yourself yet?
That's kind of an interesting question, okay? Because if I go way, way back, I would say, believe it or not, it was my mother, okay, who always encouraged me to, continue in education and pursue whatever my dreams were. And so I would have to say there, but when it gets into business, there was a catalyst in that regard, and his name was Belinsky, and he became a mentor of mine when I was working at Grumman. And the interesting part was he never wanted to be called a mentor. He did not like the idea of being someone's mentor, but he definitely was for me and was a catalyst for my entire career.
Okay, so he shaped Bill Vass, who we are seeing today.
Yes, he definitely created Bill Vass 2.0. Let's put it that way.
That's nice, amazing to know. So you studied accounting and finance, right, Professor? So at Hofstra in 1970s, you have done your accounting and finance, a world which is completely different from today's technology leadership space. How did that journey from finance to technology strategy actually happen?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because um, when I first got out of high school, it was during, believe it or not, Vietnam, and I decided that I was going to take a couple years off before I got drafted into whatever it would be, the Army or the Marines. As luck would have it, I ended up in the Navy, and I spent multiple years on active duty. And while I was in there, I was actually taking a correspondence course, not like today's, okay, which would be all internet faith. It was mailings, and it was in finance and accounting. And I really enjoyed it. And so I decided that when I got out of the Navy and started to go to school full time, that was the career of choice for me. And my primary objective was to become what was then called a controller. Now we refer to them as chief financial officers. My objective was to become a chief financial officer. But somewhere along that path, well, when I got my associate's degree, I joined uh, a company, uh, Grumman Aerospace company that's now Northrop Grumman, and started my career there in about 1971, 72. And I was in the accounting department, and I was again pursuing my dream of becoming a CFO. And along the way, there was an opportunity for me to bid on a job in one of our divisions. So I was originally part of Grumman Data Systems division, and there was another subdivision to that one, which was called Grumman System Support. And I was invited to interview for the controller's job at that division. That's where I met Ed Belinsky, who I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And he did not feel at that time that I was qualified, okay, to be um, the controller. And he really wanted to get an outside resource from Grumman, to join the ranks. But what he did offer me was a job as director of strategic planning. And that
Okay.
just catapulted my career in a totally different direction. One that I didn't think that I didn't originally think was a direction that I wanted to go in. Excuse me. So fast forward there, I worked for uh, Ed Belinsky, and he sent me to a couple schools, one at New York University and another one at the Wharton School. Both of them were courses in marketing. And so I got heavily engaged in marketing. I started reading extensively on any book I could find that was related to marketing. And I did that for a couple of years with him. And while I was there, I got involved in primarily divestitures, okay, because we decided to close the division down. And I decided um, I had a choice of either staying with Grumman or moving to a new company. And I decided to stay with the company. And I was blessed with a new position as assistant to two senior vice presidents at the Grumman Data Systems level. And that opened me up to, one was focused on R&D and administration and facilities and human resources. And the other one was on operations and sales. And so I got to spend 6 months with each one of them. Actually, it turned out to be more like a year with each one of them. And then we got a new president, and they promoted me to director of strategic planning for Grumman Data Systems.
Mhm.
And in that role, I got involved in doing acquisitions, and I did about 10 acquisitions, all of them relatively small acquisitions for our division. And then Grumman Data Systems ran out of money. And one of the divisions that I was doing the most acquisitions for happened to be back at Grumman System Support, but it was a new version of it, and it was focused on computer maintenance. And so I moved over as a vice president, within the Grumman network, and took on the role of logistics and all of the administrative functions. So finance and HR and a variety of different functions. Fast forward again, a couple of years later, my boss there left and went to a company called Computerland out on the West Coast. So we were stationed originally in New York, and he moved to California. And about a year later, he invited me to join him there. And that took me out of Grumman. I was with Grumman for about 17 years and really got me deeply embedded in the IT industry.
Oh, that's amazing to know, truly, Bill. And while you were mentioning about strategic leadership, like the very first initial transition was for you to get exposed to strategic leadership. How was your experience there? Like at a very young age, you were in the position where you had to take the leadership position and also take strategic decisions, probably. How did that imbibe in you, or how did you start building those skills?
Yeah, so it was one of the things that I didn't mention when I was working for Ed Belinsky. He had four direct reports. I was one of the four direct reports, and he early on, I was upset that he didn't take my advice on something that we were working on. And he called me into his office and he said to me, he said, there are four people that report to me. I take your advice 75% of the time. You're not going to win them all. Okay. Get over it. Um, that was really, an important turning point in the way I thought about how to influence people and to take a leadership. And it wasn't to be satisfied that he only took my advice 75% of the time, but to always be prepared to provide your advice, okay, and to provide trustworthy guidance to whomever you're reporting to. And so, he and I had a great deal of trust between one another. We were not only working colleagues, but we were friends outside of work, and that went a long way for me as a manager in the industry.
So I would say that probably you went out of the box, brought in the leadership advice even before you went into the position. That's when people started recognizing that you had the skills for it, and then they pushed you into a position of leadership, right?
Yes, and then when I shifted over to working for the two VPs, and then eventually became the director of strategic planning for the division, um, those skills obviously came in handy. That was an eye-opening experience because I did not have a lot of experience in understanding government programs, and so I had to build a team of people to do that. And by the way, that was the same time that PCs were becoming prevalent. And so I hired some college interns who had familiarity with using DOS on a PC, which was not a skill base of mine. And we were able to build some interesting models for for the organization, do some interesting, early research in that area. But I would also say it was just my personal curiosity that by getting those couple of courses at both Wharton and New York University in marketing really encouraged me to learn more and more about it. And then, then reading extensively in that field.
Most of us stop thinking rather than, because we rely a lot upon technology. I think we should move and balance both of it equally. That is the perspective that we need to bring across, using technology along with humanity. And I see that you have brought in some of those concepts in your book as well. We will also talk about it probably in the interview. Now, what separates the students and executives who go on to truly lead from those who simply manage? What is the difference you have seen up close?
Yeah. So going back to Ed Belinsky, one of the things that he said to me, as far as career and career development, and,
Uh-huh.
I mean, we're going back many years, but I think it's still true today. Okay. And he had this concept of position. Okay. And visibility and position. And the example that he used is back in his day, you would have a enclosed office and you would have hundreds of people out sitting at their desks, and all the desks were adjacent to one another. And his question was, half of them are smarter than me, half of them work harder than me. Why are they there and I'm here? Why am I their leader? And he came to a couple of assessments. Number one is definitely networking, okay, and having that visibility, within the organization, being, a respected person, for your skills and your personality. But the other one was to be very curious, okay? And so just doing your job is not good enough, okay? You have to know the jobs that are leading into your jobs and the jobs that are leading out of your jobs. So your inputs and your outputs, where that information is going. And then you need to learn it. And so once you do that, then from a leadership point of view, your knowledge base is considerably higher within the organization for sure. Okay. And that will ultimately be recognized. So I think that that whole concept is still relevant today. It's a little bit more difficult with remote working for people. And that's why I'm a real advocate for hybrid, not.
More question that I can think of in relation to the current scenario is you have seen the age or the era where we did not have technology, where we did not have the evolution, did not happen with respect to technology, computers, and everything was booming up just then. And you are seeing the age where we have completely transformed to rely on the electronic devices around us. So, how do you feel about it? What is your opinion?
Well, that's an interesting question also, because I could think back at my days at Grumman, and we had these oversized, I had a private office. It was assistant to one of those two VPs at the time. Excuse me. And it came in with an IBM monitor device, and they stuck it on my desk, and it took up half the desk. Okay, and these desks were really big desks. And I said, "So, what can I use it for?" And the guy said, "Well, you can communicate with people." And I said, "Oh, cool. Who can I communicate with?" And he said, "People in this building." So we were a 3-story building. 2 stories of it were data center. So there wasn't a whole lot of people in the group. And I said, "Well, when I want to communicate with people, I just get up and I walk over and walk into their office, or I call them on the phone and see if they're available. Um, what else can I do with this thing?" And he said, "Well, you can do your calendar." And I said, "Well, I have my calendar right here on my desk, and everything that I need to see is right here." And so it was the very, very early days of making computing available to the masses. And probably I should have been a little bit more receptive at that time. But to me, it seemed awful cumbersome and got in the way of doing the things that I needed to get done during the day to log into this thing, which was not easy. The user interface was not very pleasant, and more than not, it was not a very reliable application. Fast forward, all of a sudden, you have that, and you have voicemail came in, okay, then email came in, attachments to email, so you saw this rapid adoption. And one of the interesting things when I left Grumman and I went to Computerland, when I was at Grumman, I had an administrative assistant who did all my typing. Okay, so I would handwrite the notes out to her, and she would type them out, okay, and then send them out respectively. when I got to Computerland, it was the beginning of the PC industry as far as using it in an industrial perspective. And so when I got there, we, my, the guy that invited me to join him out there, he, I knew I wasn't going to get an administrative assistant. Instead, I got a Mac. And he said, that is your administrative assistant, and you will learn real quick how to use it effectively. And
Wow.
so that was a technological change. And even though I doubled my salary going out there, was a vice president of large portion of the business, I didn't have an administrative assistant, and
Okay.
it became a computer. And so I had to learn. Okay. And luckily it was on a Mac. Okay. At that time, because uh, Windows was still not a thing. Okay. And a Mac was much easier to, to work with and to interface with. And then all of a sudden, the various other technologies just all of a sudden happen to happen. Okay. So all of a sudden you have a cell phone. Okay. And the email became very prevalent, and then you were able to make attachments to them, which was one of the things that I disliked the most about emails, because now people didn't have to summarize their thoughts; they would just keep loading you up with tons of information and you have to read. Um, so there were good things and there were bad things about it, but for the most part, it was really good things. But just as an image, I can remember um, the first PC, portable PC I had was a Guggable um, Mac. Okay. And I can remember running through the airport with a cell phone that was probably a foot and a half long. Okay. With a Mac, a mini Mac on one arm and a garment bag on the other, running through the airports. Okay. But what I was able to do was to bypass all of the telephones. So back in that day, you jump off the plane that had no communications. You had a pager, and people would be paging you, and then you would have to run to find a bank of telephones. Okay, and you know, hope that you could find one quick enough. Okay, before your next flight, and and now when you'd have a cell phone. And so that was, super convenient in that regard. But now look at an airport, you hard pressed to find a payphone anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so, technology just continued to progress and progress. Um, I think how many times we had a single monitor, and now to have a single monitor is so unproductive. All right. So I'm sitting here now looking at you on my laptop with two monitors on either side, and I don't know how I lived without it. So I think it just becomes part of your life. All right. And in many cases, I think it's an enhancement, but it's also a distraction too, because now pretty much, you're on 24/7. So there is no downtime. You feel like always looking at your phone. Okay, whether looking for emails or whatever it might be. So even a rank and file employee is finding themselves that they're on 24/7, which may not be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We do not find that me time often.
Yes,
So we have to definitely take out in calendar to dedicate that me time because we don't find it by default rather
that's
than,
a that's a very interesting thing, because I used that as a presentation at one point. where you take 24 hours in a day and you divvy it up and say you sleep 7 to 8 hours a day, you're in at work for 8 hours to 10 hours, you're traveling, preparing to go to work or coming home, that's another couple of hours a day. Then you come home, and if you are married, you have a family, you have soccer games or, just sitting in front of the TV with the family, that really leaves very little me time.
Yes.
Okay. When you really look at it's a very small slice of time that anybody has that's truly me time.